Okay, so deep bow. Hello and welcome everyone to this live session. This is a special monk life community event where we will have a dear friend of mine and mentor of mine, Kieran Mead-Ward, to be kind of giving us a talk and sharing some of his time with us. So I'll kind of just do a little bit of an introduction and then hand it over to Kieran. What I can say is that Kieran is a wonderful friend and a wonderful person, also a very strong person and human being. And, kind of the highest praise that I can give about him is that he's just a wonderful person. And I see him as both a spiritual teacher and also a spiritual friend, and kind of a wonderful amalgamation of those qualities in my own life. So I feel very, very privileged that he's here to share the space and time with us, and that this space and time exists for him to share and bring value to our community, because I've gotten so much value from him. Kieran is a longtime vegan, longtime spiritual practitioner, non-dualist. He's attended hundreds of intensive meditation retreats. He's been a vegan for many, many years, and just a kind of person that really walks the talk and embodies the spiritual kind of values, the enlightenment values, ethically and also in terms of the mind. So I feel very grateful that he's here, and I won't belabor the point. I'll invite Kieran to come up and share. And thank you so much for being here, Kieran.
Introduction. I guess I'll resist the urge to embarrass everybody by lavishing too much affection back on Bonte in return. But you all know him. I'm sure you know that he's a uniquely just nourishing and nourishing figure to have in one's life. Oh, I have become Bonte on my screen. I've where I am.
That's okay. Just yeah, you can put the if you can put Bante to be small, and then you can see everyone. So everyone all at once, and I'll be there in spirit.
Yeah. Oh, I can see everyone at once. It's just that I
Okay.
was speaking to your little square, and then you turned into me. So
Yeah, this is something done for the sake of all of our dear friends gathering over on YouTube, so they can see you.
got okay, okay, okay. Yeah. So thanks very much, Bante, for having me, and you know the little tastes that I've gotten of this online community. I just feel like, man, there's something very, very sweet and real and creative going on here, and so I'm very grateful, for Bante's stamina and generosity in sustaining the thing, and for all of your, wonderful qualities. So nice to see you all on the screen. All right, so I guess I'll launch into it. Um, yeah, so unfortunately, I'm more run around and scattered than I'd hoped to be just before this, and I scribbled a bunch of illegible notes just 10 minutes ago of um, related themes, just like a constellation of a few themes, and I won't know until I've finished talking, which of them I pick up on and in what order I try to link them and stuff. Um, but maybe we would all enjoy if we just kind of start by tuning into where we are and the like unspeakable richness of where we are, with the sensation of the body presenting itself in space, and meanwhile these impressions of others sharing the space with us, coming to us in a unique way with these, digital streams of human presence. So because I thought that I would talk about some of the delightful things that I like to explore about effortless body awareness, and not body awareness as like an activity distinct from just receiving our whole impression of the world and of the way that me and my environment, you and your environment are always just like incredibly interpenetrating bunch of impressions, and look into this. We'll see. So like there's sort of like the more, there's two very different registers in which I was hoping to talk. One is sort of the meditative, kind of sensuous, just enjoying, exploring our being here in all the senses. And then the other is sort of how this relates to our like social body, both in the immediate sense of here we are gathered together with our whole pelts registering invitation or excitement or threat or whatever, moment by moment, from the presence of others, and the way that we're living this intense life with our bodies in society all the time. So because I have a deep interest in introspection, meditation, learning intimately about oneself in more than words, not excluding words at all, not excluding renderings and renditions of what we observe, but also through all the senses, observing how am I living, how am I feeling about myself and envisioning myself. I forgot how I started the sentence, but I know I was talking about the two registers, the meditative, slow rolling in the body and the light and the sound of our present scenario. And then on the other hand, yes, I remembered, sorry, because I feel like I'm always hyper alert to a tendency in the Buddhist world, in other parts of the spiritual world, to make things individualistic in a way that like doesn't actually reflect our vital embodied experience, where we are living at all times the one body of our environment and our social conditioning and what have you. And so like going deeply within is not just going deeply within myself, I would say. It's going deeply within the whole body of society and of nature and what have you. So I'm sure that this is feeling a little bit tangled to people. Hopefully it will resolve itself somewhat as we go. So we'll just start with kind of the sweet stuff. And I can't guess, don't have a chance of guessing what each of you is experiencing in your mood and body and room at this moment. So obviously I will just have to be speaking for myself, and you all can just lightly, effortlessly let my own observations bounce off your own. You don't have to be dictated to by me. I'll just explore my experience, and you all can notice how you can compare notes, kind of. So I noticed that since I've been talking and a certain amount of tension rising to the upper floors of my body as I speak, it's funny, isn't it, that kind of like shrinking of feeling eyes on me happens. Well, meanwhile, everybody in their own friendly flesh is very friendly, but like we go into these little tunnels where we don't notice how open are the gazes and the company. But so I notice, this condensation, confinement in forehead, in eyeballs. And in noticing it, it kind of puffs a little bit. It breathes out into space. Yeah, oh, it's nice to feel like the relaxation of these sites of struggle, kind of. Nice to let them become feeling again. Like it's easy to almost leave the head out of the world as if it isn't part of the material world, but some metaphysical site or something, some Cartesian theater where just thought is happening, but meanwhile is intimately responding as feeling to the world. The skull, for me there's some tension across the whole skull, a bit of like a residue of headache from emotional exchanges in the past 24 hours and stuff. Jean Klein, who is a wonderful, now dead Advaita teacher, he did wonderful work with body awareness and with discovering like the really innocent body that is always right there in sensation underneath our sort of like iron gate coming down conditionings of the defended body, and how there is underneath it just this alive body that just flows as sensation with nothing solid anywhere, and indeed no kind of border, so friendly that any sound we hear, the air touching us, is just sort of all in this one tactile field that just is open to the world. And something he would say that again and again, I didn't meet him personally. I've met some of his successors who carry on his work. He would say something like, okay, so feel the forehead or feel the eyeballs. Let them be feeling. He would never say, feel or sense, almost without following it up with, let it be feeling. And this is beautiful because it just undoes the whole effort and aiming and intention of trying to sense some part of the body or whatever. It already is spilling and overflowing as feeling. And so just to let it be feeling is what it means to sensitively, richly receive it and really be aware of it. And in particular, when I let forehead, eyeballs, scalp, throat become feeling, these areas which I'm used to taking as like a tense site of agency, where I will do the right or the wrong thing. If instead I let them flow as their own feeling without interference, then it seems to me that what follows me to what I'm trying to observe. And it's almost like then an upwelling of the global impression of body sitting here, sounds coming, and all just so freely presenting themselves. And a nice thing that I notice is the back of my body, the back of my head, that kind of restful darkness in the unseen, back of the body, kind of back of my world, almost like back of my thought or back of my acts of attention, picturing it almost like a big dark pool or something, some restful waters to sink back into. Occasionally lately I've been like facing somebody, including like facing a Zen teacher in Dokusan, and noticed, like the tense gathering of the body into the front, which I imagine for most of us, right, is a very habitual way of being. Here's where I'm looked at, and here's where I look out of. And so it's just sort of like we almost don't notice what's behind us. And I remember a couple of times recently having like a really sweet sensation of like noticing all the subtle vibration at the back of the body, and then just like such like a spreading of the breast, opening of the heart to the person in front of me, and widening of the gaze because of this back body. But yeah. And maybe similar to the back of the body is the support of the body on the broad surface of the earth, and the softness of the belly that is allowed to hang loose, and just almost like move with the breath like a sheet on a clothesline is the image coming, just like just will-o'-the-wisp, just wherever the breath goes. And then maybe just I like to ask myself, because it's interesting, I wonder if as I'm directing attention to the back of the body and the earth and the legs, feet on the floor or in the chair or folded under you if you're sitting cross-legged, it's interesting to notice if there's any effort to direct the attention in these places. I think, when I was first told that I should be more bodily aware or something, I think I kind of pictured it like holding my breath and diving into the obscure depths of the body or something, which is going to involve like a furrowing of the brow, a return to this tensing of the face, and forgetting that the head and the face are also just part of the flow of bodily sensation. Whereas it feels to me that it's more a matter of just letting sensation spill into the room, rather than having to do any directing of attention. So that's to say, we just receive what we receive. And if the sensation of the body is mingled with like some electrified thought sensations and anxiety or whatever it might be, we just let that come to us. And when there isn't like this tense center pinning things down, trying to attend, then maybe all of these things just kind of swim together like a soap bubble, into just like a single global impression. Maybe round and wide and somewhat restful, and maybe not at this moment, maybe somewhat constricted, but nevertheless in expanding a little, releasing, dispersing. Maybe the whole thing can gather into one multi-sensory impression. It's really interesting to ask how the different senses are sewn together moment by moment, how thought is sewn together with the sensations of the body, with the vision of the room, or with imagery with the eyes are closed of the body in the room, sound, and both how they're sewn together, and also like going into any one of them, sometimes it's kind of like, wow, what even is sensing or hearing? Like we're very used to using these terms and like knowing what 5 senses or 6 senses are, but like how do we, they're all like defined in terms of something else, and like when we just go into it, like, wow, what is it? But so in a very effortless and loose way, I would encourage, might be worth just kind of asking the question about any part of the body or about whatever total impression of the body is announcing itself. Asking the question, oh man, I kind of went into it for a moment and like totally forgot what I was trying to say because I was like, sinking into the body. I'm just going to give myself a moment and let it emerge on its own. Yeah, just asking the question, how is the presence of the body announcing itself moment by moment? I don't have very good words for whatever the whole field of sensation that continuously announces the body's presence is, tingling, subtly vibrating. But one thing I do notice about it is that it is a happening. The body only announces its presence by continually announcing it. It stopped speaking as sensation. It fell silent as this vibration, this voice of vibration. Then my body, or that part of my body, would cease to announce its presence. And so I find this really beautiful because, means that as a matter of experience, my body is made of the tenderest stuff, the most delicate tissue, and like nothing solid. If I just let myself go into the sensation of, for instance, weight, the way that the bottom of the body is heavier than the top, perhaps. Just go into it as sensation, dropping the label weight, so it's nameless. And I'm allowed to just like whoosh into it fully, without effort, without restraint. That it's almost like, in a way, it isn't even weight anymore. It's almost like a weightless density of sensation, which is also an expanse of sensation, kind of, or a great collocation of little sparkles of sensation. And perhaps the same is true about pressure. In my case, the pressure of my legs and butt and feet and knees on my bed. So like I let the picture present itself of the surface of my skin and my pants and the bed. But meanwhile, the sensation itself doesn't have two halves. It doesn't have, one thing pressed against another. The feeling of the bed is my own feeling, you know. It's nothing but myself. It's nothing but myself with this marvelous density of feeling. And same is true perhaps of one's skin in the air, face or arms or hands, whatever's exposed or whatever's touching clothes. Kind of like if I just let myself freely play around that border, maybe that border is much looser than I imagine. It's almost like body's just free, almost even to like, when I think of the wall behind me, it's almost like the sensation of my back touches the wall, perhaps, ever so subtly. And I don't mean something like fancy or it needs like deep samadhi in order to happen. I think it's kind of just the way we work. When we hear a sound, feeling of our body kind of takes the shape of that sound, takes the, measures that sound almost. When we look at, like, in my case, I can look out a window and see a tree there. And, the heft and straightness of the trunk is felt by my body, like my tactile feeling goes out to it. So I went on longer than I intended, actually, with this part of it. Forgive me for the hurriedness. It would be nice to, like, really slow down and even more sweetly marinate in these kinds of explorations. But and I'm not leaving them behind entirely now, but I want to start exploring how this connects to the social. And so for one thing, just like feeling just how very vulnerable the body is, kind of has two faces, and when I say the body, I mean the body as sensation, not the idea of the body, but just how it's presenting itself as sensation, and secondarily as kind of shifting imagery, picturing the limbs and stuff, which happens in this open tactile field. It comes and goes. It's like when we pay attention, it's not like we have a constant shape of the body. It's more like some kind of constant automatic scanning that makes the body shapeshift, in space. Just the possibility that this vulnerability has two faces, two like opposite ways of showing up. Most of the time, for most of us, we're slightly inattentive to this vulnerability, but it's nevertheless making itself felt, at all times. And what this tends to do is kind of create like an electric fence around the borders of the body, particularly if we're with others, when others are looking at us and this sort of thing, this vulnerability is what makes the felt need of a wall between me and the world appear. And so isn't it interesting that when we allow that feeling to be feeling of the vulnerability of the body, of vulnerability of sensation, well, what happens then? I shouldn't too much over-determine y'all's experience, I should just ask, and we can all report differently what happens. But one thing that I find happens when I allow the body to spill as feeling and the vulnerability just like to vibrate is that vulnerability becomes something very sweet, something that doesn't feel the need to contain itself, but is just so friendly, like a childlike or animal-like friendliness. And it's like that very vulnerability is what brings the world so near, It's already so near, and we just usually don't notice. It's like the same vulnerability that makes us feel we have to keep the world out is also, like if we settle into the body, let's say with eyes closed for a minute, and really allow it undefendedly to feel invited to spill as feeling into the space, and then we look at a person's face, or maybe less complicatedly, less fraught, look at a tree or a chair or what have you, I find that it's almost just like an instant electric connection or something, like, oh, look at that sweet thing that is touching me, something like that. So then I want somehow to make the connection, and I have a dim sense of how to do it, between this sort of observation of the body in a social space, its vulnerability, either defended or feeling the lovely support and friendship of those around one. How this can lead us not to be solipsistic and merely individualistic in our spiritual practice, but actually so creative, Like if, let's say, for instance, we're at a meditation center, and we feel what it is to sit silently among others, and then maybe to have a cup of tea with them afterwards or whatever. It seems to me that this kind of feeling of like my body is like an open bay that is meeting the sea of the environment and the other people around, waves going back and forth at all times. It leads to quite an imaginative sensitivity about the shape that any social situation is taking. A real curiosity about what's going on for me and for others, and whatever our ritual agreement is of how we're interacting at this time, So it seems like it can at once lead to a freeing, healing insight into my own defenses and possibility for them to open up. And, almost as one single body, some imagination starting to move of how can we, as a community, what are the other possibilities we haven't tapped of ways to be together that really affirm each other and allow people to explore their widest creativity and their deepest candor. And then beyond that, to notice when we're walking down the street, for one thing, just we're all very deeply used to, so that it becomes second nature. It seems like just the way the world is built. Notice that we're walking on public streets between private plots of land, right? Private houses and yards, or stores that belong to somebody else, but we're allowed to walk in if we watch ourselves. And so it seems like without much forcing, without much self-conscious trying to be a socially minded or politically minded person, just the imagination is touched at the same time that the senses are touched. And what I might know about the way society is set up and other ways it could be set up, might get me thinking, I might start to notice ways that a society built largely around profit, in all kinds of subtle ways has infiltrated the feeling of my body. It might have infiltrated, for instance, in spiritual communities as a feeling that I have to be, I have to prove something as a meditator, the kind of competitiveness and you're on your own. I feel for me, it has entered into me as I got to be special even in these ways, rather than we are all unique, amazing wildernesses as meditators and as spiritual discoverers, with our own, each of us, an amazing richness to share about what we find, when we become sensitive to our experience. So I can only give the beginning, of a suggestion of how this inquiry can be so open-ended and can be open to, considerations of how our very body has learned to be based on where we're situated in society, For me, for instance, there's a lot that I can only imagine about how it is to be situated in society in a way where, like, I don't just automatically belong, right? Like, I mean, I check all the boxes where, like, I seem to belong in most dominant spaces, right? As a man and a white man and a straight cis man, etc., right? So it's interesting that, like, in allowing the vulnerability of one's own body, two things happen at once, right? On the one hand, there's like much more room for me to be as I am, even with the trauma and the way people may be looking at me with friendly or unfriendly manners, you know. But also there's room to, like, say, oh, how can we do this more beautifully, you know? So I didn't look at my notes even one damn time. And there's a lot more I could cover. And probably, if I were wise, I would pause and look at them for a moment. But I'm not wise, so I will just end the formal talk here and see if anybody wants to interact about anything. And let me say that, like, for one thing, you know, you can ask questions, but you absolutely can also just share whatever thoughts have come to you in connection with this, you know. Just delightful to hear everybody's thoughts. And also, if you do want to ask a question, it's kind of fun if you ask something out of left field, right? It doesn't have to be obviously connected to what I've said today. And Bhante, is there anything that I should know about how we proceed with this part of it?
Well, we're all just so fortunate and happy to have you here and enjoying this talk. I know I can speak for everyone in that dimension. Yeah, we just can open up the space for people to share and ask questions and be authentic. And whatever we throw at Kieran, he'll have some kind of response, some kind of wisdom to throw back at us. So please feel welcome and invited to join in and to show up and to share. Watching over on YouTube, you can leave a comment and I'll relay that to Kieran. But you're also welcome to just hop in to the Discord if you're watching on YouTube, but you're a member of the Discord. Just come on in and you can ask your question with your voice and connect that way. Okay? So please be generous as Kieran has been generous with us and share and throw some interesting curveballs. Let's see if this guy's the real deal or not.
Nope.
Maybe, Kieran, it would be interesting to hear you share about just kind of how you know, people are starting from different levels and different positions in meditation practice and kind of getting into meditation. So I'd love to hear about kind of how you went from being, you know, just a scrawny kind of suffering teenager, you know, young person who's trying to, you know, grab onto anything meditation related, and then got into this, you know, this kind of embodiment of being a, you know, a vegan bodybuilder and a non-dualist and someone who's, you know, really quite skillful in terms of you know, meditation practices and very knowledgeable, because not everyone gets the chance to kind of go to that level. So it'd be nice to hear a little bit about that journey from just beginning and what that beginning was for you, and then how that progressed to your current way of looking at meditation and your spiritual embodiment.
Right. Oh man. Well, there is no way, like, to tell this story without telling a million lies. You know, like, I'm the last to know, like, the story of how my meditation has unfolded or whatever. And also, I should say, I don't think bodybuilders would accept me as a bodybuilder. I'm just someone, like, haphazardly addicted to training stimulus. You know, like, I'm not like a systematic type. But anyway, so my interest in first, like, I read the Tao Te Ching as a freshman in high school, and then read some Zen books. And at the time, man, I was just really a profoundly, profoundly defended, bunged up, very, very miserable and scared and, false teenager, as most teenagers are. Actually, there's some beautiful teenagers out there. I was one of the more difficult cases in some ways, and was also smoking weed multiple times a day as an attempt to, I don't know, stuff feelings and stuff. And then I discovered first actually Kundalini yoga, and then a local Zen center in my town, and started going. So what I want to say about those early years is, and by early years I mean like the first like 25 years of my meditation practice or whatever, man, I was a really bad meditator. Like, for all that I have like beautiful moments, I'm still a really bad meditator. And I think like that's a beautiful thing about it, is like I've never met somebody who isn't a bad meditator. Mostly, like we're not built for for chaos not to be in charge most of the time, But so I'm supposed to say something helpful, right? About like how this chaos can resolve. And I would say that for me, over time, a huge part of what has made things so much easier and made it so much easier for like some really difficult emotional state or really tight mental state to open into something else, sometimes surprisingly quickly, has been like becoming more and more relaxed about the fact that I'm a wilderness, rather than something that I direct and control. And that awareness and sensitivity, can touch any number of different states. And part of it is just like the freedom to meditate on what we consider unmeditative, to really be curious about, what is going on with this compulsiveness, this distraction, if we want to call it that. Like what there's some eros in it for me, apparently. Like there's something in me that wants to go into a tunnel and not be awake. And so like rather than just holding up a template and an ideal of how I should be that isn't that way, just to really wonder what moves in me that makes it that way. And for that matter, if being awake seems unattractive, is that because I have a narrow picture of being awake, one which like shuts down some of the ways I want to be or think, and what would be the truly loose and inviting way of being awake that just feels like coming home into a wide pool, Did that make sense? Probably some of it did and some of it didn't. To sum up, I'm saying that that an appreciation that being awake or being aware doesn't have to look any one way, and in fact, its incredible diversity is its beauty, In another way, it's very simple, and single, because it's always a matter of just letting the world speak for itself, letting the one bright pearl, as a Zen koan says, that is me and the environment co-constituting at this moment, just letting it show up however it does. And that awareness is so much more precise, but it is so much more loose and unefforted. I'm just letting stuff appear as it is, and not having to say, this is awakeness, this is distraction, but just like, what's going on? How does it swim into its own single impression when I let it? So. Well, anytime that there's a pause, I'll take advantage to peek at my notes in case there's anything vital I didn't say. But please speak up if you got something to say. Oh, I remember one little thing I would love to say that I didn't say. And that is that, like, you know, whatever in us feels most vexingly private, shameful, you know, most vexingly what is wrong with me, the way I don't measure up. Like, it's worth inquiring whether those sites are actually the sites that are made out of, in a way, the most pieces of the world outside me, you know? Like what I feel is impossible for me, what I feel is just I can't overcome, and what is shameful, and what have you. Like, these came to be through so many tones of voice, ways people looked at me, ways people responded well when I thought they would respond badly, or badly when I thought they would respond well. And, you know, schoolrooms, offices, you know, all these things. I would offer that, like, we are so joined to the world by an umbilical cord that, like, our most private and shameful seeming things are precisely the places where we are made out of everybody else, you know? So, like, hopefully that allows some wider breathing around it and generosity, you know? Okay, I'll say something else. But, you know, there's no like hand raising function in Discord. This is the first time I've been here because I want to allow people to interrupt me. You know, like I'll fill the air as needed, looking at my notes, things I didn't say, but only, you know, as needed. So if somebody wants to chime in, uh, I guess Bante, you'll be on that. You'll interrupt me if you need to.
um, ready to make use of the technology to take care. Looks like Meredith is a wants to say something, share something, which is great.
Hi, thank you for being here and speaking. Appreciate it. So I'm thinking about how one, I've walked with a cane for a very long time. I had spine issues, and so from when I was rather young. And I'm thinking about how, as a person with disabilities, though I don't really view myself as disabled, we move in the world differently. Um, there is a self-awareness and a guardedness that happens at the same time, that people who are what I call temporarily able-bodied, because eventually you will start, things will probably fall apart on you at some point, that we move in the world differently. And it's it's interesting because I can remember when I was able-bodied, I was going to be a dancer and things like that, so my body was able to do things. Um, and I just think it's interesting how, um, I guess, how not in touch people are with the fact that they are going to not be able to be who they are now, and how attached they are to their physicality. So I just thought it was interesting just listening to you talk about the senses in the body and sort of perception with your eyes closed and thinking about the back and stuff. So I just thought it was kind of interesting. I want to add how it feels when you've changed, um, like for me, how it is. So that's all. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that is a super interesting contribution. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. One thing that comes to mind immediately is like how, you know, how like your exploration of ways of feeling guarded, and maybe, moments when that guardedness doesn't need to be there, whether because the circumstances, it understands, the needs of somebody with a disability, or just because, you yourself are open enough at that moment that it doesn't seem as necessary. The way that, like, it gives you, opportunity to notice a whole lot, about your own guardedness or opening. And it also gives you an incredible opportunity to notice what other people who feel very able-bodied are not noticing at all about, about what a space is like, So yeah. I feel fairly able-bodied at the moment, and like it's been, and I am, except for like when I get an injury or when I'm sick or something, and then I'm reminded, man, some people have a very different experience of the world. So I don't think I have much to pronounce on about that. Just to say, like, I hope you, continue to discover and share with others all that is to be discovered in that, So, and the two aspects of what allows for unguardedness, because, they're on the one hand, there is, unguardedness that becomes more possible just because we tune in and soften. But, like, how far can that go in any given situation when like something is totally, even callous towards your physical needs? I don't know. So it's a lot to be explored. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have we have a question here, Kieran, from someone joining on YouTube, and they say, "Does Kieran have any advice for meditation positions? I can sit in quarter half lotus comfortably, but when I get up, my joints are stiff and somewhat sore. It seems to get worse as I practice."
Yeah, good question. But probably there's only so much I can say in general, like I could probably be more helpful if I just had a conversation with this person one-on-one. And indeed, feel free to reach out to me, through Bhante or whatever, if you'd like to. Not that I'm like a trained yoga teacher or posture expert or anything, but, I have the experience of my own aches and pains and retreats over the years and how I've dealt with it. But so, personally, what I find most of the time nowadays, for a long time I sat in half lotus, and then when that would get too painful, I would switch to seiza, where you have what I would usually just have like a cushion under my butt with my legs alongside it. There's also kneeling benches. Seiza is a kneeling position, but supported with the butt raised. And the higher you raise the butt, generally, the easier it is on the knees. So I found that, when things got uncomfortable, the alternation between a more tripod cross-legged position, half lotus or Burmese so-called or whatever, and the seiza was very nice to change which bits of one, we're feeling the tension of sitting. Personally, I found Burmese delightful, but there's no guarantee that you will. Burmese, you usually need a little more height under the butt than for half lotus or full lotus, and then your legs are just uncrossed, one ankle in front of the other, and you can experiment with like how wide to kind of spread your knees. Sometimes it can be really nice to have like a really wide tripod, sometimes a little closer in. And then also, of course, don't feel that it isn't meditating when you are sitting on a nice wooden chair with an elegant spine. And then when that gets too much, don't consider that it's not meditating when you sit in a recliner and lean back, or lie on the floor with all points touching the earth, like it's endless discovery, right? It's not like there's an end of the road when you've discovered the answer to your posture exploration. It's different every time. Just explore what it is to be in a body in different positions. So.
Yeah, Amanda, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just curious. I wanted to ask about kind of open awareness and um, I guess introversion and shyness. Like you kind of touched on a little stuff about how you kind of, if you're facing people, you feel like there's a heat maybe to your face or perspiration. And then it occurred to me when you were saying that usually when I have that sensation, it tends to shut me down. And I haven't thought to really observe that part of social situations. So I didn't know if you could speak more about that. And if, I guess maybe it seemed like you maybe use that as an opportunity to observe it and just allow it to be there and move through it rather than shutting down. Is that kind of what you were implying or?
Mm, mm, mm. Right, right. And like the easiest place to start is just noticing how I am shutting down, just just observing it and not noticing that there's kind of a reaction to the reaction often. And when there isn't that reaction to the reaction, when I allow the shutting down to just happen, to just notice it, it tends to be briefer, more temporary. It's just like, oh, here's the shutting down and then the opening up again. And there's so much to notice about it, just kind of like freely playing around, splashing around in the waters, and what there is to notice bodily, what there is to notice, about how I'm feeling about myself in the space with others, representing my body in space. What's happening to my voice, the ability to speak and to breathe as I speak. So yeah, I find that the freest, the most unencumbered way to accommodate shutting down is with zero control or effort to do anything to it, and just noticing what it feels like. Personally, I also love the sorts of observation that Douglas Harding makes. Is anybody familiar with Douglas Harding and the headless way, so-called? No? He's got beautiful books, incredibly original and charming. And you can go to headless.org for an introduction from one of his kind of successors, Richard Lang. But it just has to do with noticing that what you actually see versus what your scared psychology tells you see in the visual sense, with vision. As far as, I feel like I have this space here that's getting hot that everybody's looking at. When I notice what I actually see, there's sensations in space, and the space is actually just like wide open and just utterly friendly in a sense. It can't keep anybody out, I don't see a face here. When one first encounters this, it sounds pretty esoteric, and I imagine that might be the experience people are having right now. But it's cool stuff, and it's rather delightful how different it feels to be just an open, clear lake or sky for people, rather than a little pinned face confronting them, literally confronting them.
Kieran, could
Yes.
could you do us all a favor and please, I'm sorry we didn't address this earlier, but could you kind of stand up and show what your shirt says? Because we're just seeing the "not your mom," and some people might not know what that.
Yes. right. Okay.
Really put that on display here, and this is a real message for everyone.
Can you read it?
You read it.
Not
for
your
us.
mom. Not your mom. Not your milk.
Wow.
Any question?
Wow.
Yeah, so maybe
that's pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, pretty self-explanatory, and we should try to arrange a time for you to have a, to give a talk about the spirituality and the truth of spirituality as it goes together with veganism, right? True morality, true virtue. So we can try to make a time to do that. We'd all enjoy that a lot.
I would love to. I would love to. Yes. And for what it's worth, I don't consider that like the vast non-veganism, the animal exploitation of the world is because of immoral people. It's because we're all, victims and perpetrators at the same time of, a vast system of just forgetting about animals' subjectivity and stuff. Mm-hmm. Meredith.
Just real quick on the milk thing. I am vegan, so I don't drink milk. But nowadays, there's so many great milk substitutes that taste like milk. If you enjoyed that taste, that there's, just putting that out there. There's a lot of milk substitutes out there. You don't have to bother the cow anymore. Okay, I've said my piece.
Yes. No, thank you. I often forget to do that crucial bit of like telling people, okay, this moral challenge I'm issuing, it's not as hard to meet it as you might think. There's all these options, so.
And then if you do become vegan, you also get to wear morally, get to wear your righteousness, so instead of just wearing a beanie, you can wear a beanie that says "Not your mom, not your milk." But if you're not vegan, you can't wear that. Yeah.
No, I mean it's funny. Like it's true. Like sometimes I almost feel like the personal impact of not consuming animal products is maybe even less than the impact of like feeling entitled to preach about it because you yourself are vegan, I've seen this again and again, like even someone who goes vegan, not for ethical issues, but whatever, they were experimenting with plant-based eating, and then they feel entitled to come around and really think deeply about the issues. They don't feel so guilty and like divided in themselves anymore, so yeah.
Okay, we did have usually we try to keep our sessions to about an hour, Kieran, so maybe this will be our last question. And this is from Sebastian Scott. And they say, what did you learn and experience from your time in meditation centers? Also, how old were you when you first had an experience of initial enlightenment? And we can be generous with the enlightenment word. Sometimes us spiritualists can be a little bit, maybe hold it to a high regard, and, I'm not enlightened or what have you, but I'm sure you can come up with something. You must have had some enlightenment experiences, so please tell us about them.
My first enlightenment experience was tomorrow, actually. I plan to have one tomorrow. No, I don't know. Like, who knows? There's probably a great many experiences I haven't had, and it's not like I can point to any one moment when things changed forever. I can point to moments when things surprised me and like life took over, and that left a real impact. But for me, at least, usually an hour later, like I was getting about confused. I was back to my old tricks again, even when it seems so obvious and eloquent and overwhelming. So for me, it's been, very much more a matter of, I don't know what to call it, but any single moment has not done the trick. What single moments have done is given something to digest, and like, and even kind of like, it's kind of like integrating an experience is almost a matter of that experience disintegrating. Taking the shape of all the different shapes that life takes afterward, like it has to transpose itself into all the different situations and ways of being you find yourself in. I feel like I only addressed half the question. What was the other half?
About the kind of what the effect or what did you experience by staying at the meditation centers?
Yeah. Well, it's complicated because when you're at a meditation center, if you're not doing like a long retreat, there's the aspect, of course, of getting to meditate a lot and getting to do it in community, and that's beautiful and powerful. But there's also the aspect that you're with a whole bunch of people who don't agree with you about everything. And depending on how hierarchical the meditation center is, disagreeing can be a lot of work, very painful, can bring, bring slanders, understandings, and all sorts. So, it's been complicated living at meditation centers. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kieran, for being here and for helping us to enjoy the present moment together. Hopefully this can become a more regular thing. We would love to have you, weekly come by if you can make the time to do an event. And so if you want to say any final words, or sometimes we do a bit of a closing chant together. Maybe you have some rhythmic noises that would be lovely and unifying that you want to share as we wrap up, or some final words.
Yeah, sure. So I would love to come more often. Absolutely. Thank you very much. I will be traveling to South Africa for like the next couple of weeks, so I won't be doing it immediately, but when I come back, we could arrange to come again. And I really appreciate everybody's open-heartedness and subtle questions and comments. Okay, yeah, and I'll do a chant. Okay. Anybody? Well, I guess people can't really all join in at once anyway, right? So you'll
Yeah.
you can chant with your mute on, I guess. Chant along. Buddham, Vante, Dhammam, Vante, Sangam, Vante, Buddham, Dhammam, Sangam, Vante, Buddham, Vante, Dhammam, Sangam, Vante, Buddham, Dhammam, Sangam, Vante. Thank you, everybody. And have a beautiful evening or morning or afternoon or whatever it might be. All right. See you next time.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. And everyone on YouTube, don't be shy to leave a like if you enjoyed Kieran's talk. And of course, welcome to join us on the Discord server, okay? Bye-bye.